I'm Dr. Christy, and this is Climbing Fish Parenting, practical parenting strategies in 20 minutes or less. I'm a psychologist and behavior analyst, and I work with exhausted, overwhelmed parents who feel like they've tried everything and nothing works. If you're listening to this while folding the laundry, hiding in your car, or wishing bedtime would just end already, you're in the right place. Today's topic is Backtalk and Defiance. By the end of this episode, you'll understand why your child pushes back the way they do, what the cultural shift in parenting has made so confusing, and how to teach respectful disagreement without crushing your child's voice. Ready to transform your parenting journey? Let's dive in. Let me start with a scenario that probably feels familiar. Your 10-year-old storms into the kitchen and says, "This is so unfair. You let her stay up late, but I have to go to bed at 9. Your body tenses, your jaw clenches, and you're standing there thinking, is this disrespect? Should I shut this down? Or is my child advocating for themselves and I'm about to crush their voice? And here's the problem. Most of us actually don't know. So we either overreact and punish them for speaking up, or we let genuine disrespect slide because we're terrified of being too strict. Both responses backfire, and both leave us lying awake at night, wondering if we're screwing up our kids. Here's what I need you to know. The confusion you're feeling isn't because you're a bad parent. It's because you're navigating a massive cultural shift in how we parent, and nobody gave us a roadmap. Let's talk about how you were probably raised. If you're like most parents I work with, you grew up in a home where any pushback was labeled disrespect and shut down immediately. Because I said so was the beginning and end of every conversation. Questioning your parents? That was grounds for punishment. Having an opinion that differed from theirs? Forget it. And if we're being really honest, a lot of us internalize the message that our feelings didn't matter, our perspective wasn't important, and speaking up for ourselves was dangerous. So now, as adults, we're trying to parent differently. We want our kids to have a voice. We want them to feel heard. We want to raise children who can advocate for themselves, who won't be pushovers, who will speak up when something's wrong. But here's where it gets messy. We're trying to teach our kids something we were never taught ourselves. We're trying to model respectful disagreement when we have no idea what that actually looks like. And we're terrified that if we let our kids push back at all, we're raising entitled kids who will talk to everyone like garbage. So we're stuck in this impossible middle ground. We don't want to parent the way we were parented, but we also don't know what the alternative looks like. And our kids are caught in the middle, trying to figure out, can I have a voice here or not? Is it safe to disagree with my parents? What's the line between advocacy and disrespect? This is the gray area nobody talks about, and it's where most of us are completely lost. Here's what's at stake, and this is critical. If we shut down all pushback, we raise kids who can't advocate for themselves. They become adults who stay in toxic relationships because they don't know how to say, this isn't okay. They get walked all over at work because they were taught that disagreeing with authority is disrespectful. They struggle to set boundaries because they learned early on that their needs don't matter. But on the flip side, if we don't teach respect, we raise kids who alienate everyone around them. They become adults who can't hold jobs because they don't understand how to disagree professionally. They damage relationships because they never learned that you can advocate for yourself and be respectful at the same time. Your child needs both. They need to know their voice matters, and they need to know how to use that voice in a way that people will actually listen to. And here's the hard truth. Teaching this is uncomfortable. It requires you to allow disagreement even when it feels threatening. It requires you to stay calm when your child pushes back. And it requires you to get really clear on where the line is between advocacy and disrespect, because that line exists, even if it's blurry. So let's get practical. When your child says something that makes your blood boil, "You can't make me. That's not fair. You're being mean." Here's the question you need to ask yourself before you react. Is this an attack, or is there a legitimate need underneath the bad delivery? Because here's what I see all the time. Boundaries often sound like backtalk when kids don't have the skills to express them appropriately. Let me give you an example. Your 6-year-old yells, "You're mean." Most parents hear that as disrespect and immediately shut it down. But what if that child is actually trying to say, "I feel hurt and I don't understand why you said no"? They just don't have the emotional vocabulary or regulation skills to express it any other way. Or your 10-year-old snaps, "This is stupid." You hear disrespect. But what they might actually be communicating is, "I'm overwhelmed and I don't know how to do this, and I'm scared of failing." Your job isn't to let the rude tone slide, but it's also not to punish the underlying need. Your job is to separate the two, to address the disrespectful delivery while honoring the legitimate concern underneath. And that's really hard to do in the moment when you're triggered and your own nervous system is activated. If your child has ADHD, anxiety, autism, or sensory sensitivities, this whole thing gets even more complicated. And here's why. For kids with ADHD, they're going to blurt out things before their brain has time to process whether it sounds respectful or not. What you hear as backtalk might genuinely be impulsivity, not intentional disrespect. Their brain is moving faster than their filter can keep up with. For anxious kids, backtalk often escalates when they feel out of control. When their world feels unpredictable or unsafe, they push back harder. It's not defiance. It's their nervous system trying to regain some sense of control in a situation that feels threatening. For kids on the autism spectrum, they may not pick up on the social cues about tone, body language, or what's considered respectful. What sounds rude or disrespectful to you might be their completely genuine, literal attempt to communicate. They're not trying to be disrespectful. They're just speaking in a way that feels natural to them, and it doesn't match our neurotypical social expectations. For kids with sensory sensitivities, check whether sensory overload is triggering the backtalk. If they're overstimulated, hungry, tired, dysregulated, their capacity for respectful communication goes out the window. It's not that they're choosing to be disrespectful. Their nervous system is flooded, and they can't access the skills they normally have. So when you're dealing with a neurodivergent child who talks back, you have to ask an additional layer of questions. Is this behavior or is this nervous system? Is this defiance or is this dysregulation? Is this intentional disrespect or is this a communication breakdown? And the answer changes how you respond. Here's something that's making all of this even more confusing. We're living in a culture that sends really mixed messages about respect and authority. On one hand, we're told to raise independent thinkers, to encourage our kids to question things, to teach them not to blindly follow authority. We want them to be critical thinkers who don't just accept because I said so. But on the other hand, we panic when our kids actually do question us. We worry that if they push back on our rules or disagree with our decisions, we're losing control. We're afraid that letting them have a voice means we're being permissive or that we're not in charge. And honestly, a lot of us were raised in authoritarian homes where the parent was always right, no questions asked. So when our child disagrees with us, it triggers something deep. It feels threatening. It feels like a loss of control. But here's what I need you to understand. Your child disagreeing with you is not the same as your child disrespecting you. A child who says, "I don't think that's fair. Can we talk about it?" is advocating for themselves. That's a good thing. That's what we want. A child who says, "You're so stupid, I'm not doing it," is being disrespectful. That's not okay. The difference is in the intent and the delivery, and you have to be able to tell them apart. Because if you shut down all disagreement, you're teaching your child that their perspective doesn't matter. But if you allow all pushback without teaching respectful communication, you're setting them up for failure in every relationship they'll ever have. Let me talk specifically about strong-willed kids for a minute, because this is where the confusion gets even worse. Strong-willed kids push back more. They question more. They need to understand the why behind every rule. And for a lot of parents, this feels exhausting and disrespectful. But here's what's actually happening. Strong-willed kids have an intense need for autonomy and agency. They're not trying to undermine you. They're trying to make sense of their world and feel like they have some control over their life. The problem is, we often interpret their need for autonomy as defiance. We see their questioning as disrespect. and we respond by cracking down harder, which only makes them push back more. Here's the truth. Strong-willed kids need more voice, not less. They need more opportunities to have input, not fewer. Because when you give them appropriate autonomy within your structure, they actually cooperate more. But when you try to control everything, they dig in harder. So with strong-willed kids, you have to ask yourself, am I giving them enough opportunities to have a say in age-appropriate decisions? Am I explaining the reasoning behind my rules in a way that makes sense to them? Or am I just saying because I said so and expecting them to comply without understanding? Strong-willed kids will challenge you. That's not defiance. That's their wiring. And if you can learn to work with that wiring instead of against it, everything gets easier. So how do you actually teach respectful disagreement when you have no model for it? Here's what this looks like in practice. Step 1, make it safe to disagree. You have to explicitly tell your child that it's okay to have a different opinion than you. That sounds simple, but most of us never actually say it out loud. So say it. You're allowed to disagree with me. You're allowed to think a rule is unfair. You just have to tell me about it respectfully. Step 2, model what respectful disagreement looks like. Use yourself as the example. Say things like, I disagree with Grandma about how much screen time you should have, but I don't yell at her or call her names. I say, I hear your perspective, but here's why I'm making this decision. That's how we disagree respectfully in this family. Step 3, teach them the specific words to use. Don't expect your child to figure this out on their own. Give them scripts. When you think a rule is unfair, here's what you say. Mom, I'd like to talk to you about this rule because I don't understand it. Or, Dad, I feel like this isn't fair and I'd like to explain why. Step 4, stay calm when they use those words. This is the hardest part. When your child comes to you and says, I think this rule is unfair, your instinct might be to shut it down immediately because it feels like a challenge to your authority. But if you do that, you've just taught them that it's not actually safe to disagree with you. Instead, you say, okay, I'm listening. Tell me why you think it's unfair. You listen to their perspective. You validate their feelings. And then you either adjust the rule if it makes sense, or you explain your reasoning in a way they can understand. You're showing them you can have a voice. I will listen to you. And even if the answer is still no, your perspective matters to me. That's how you teach respectful disagreement. Now, all of that said, there is a line, and you have to be crystal clear about where it is. Here's the line. You can disagree with me. You can tell me you think something is unfair. You can advocate for yourself, but you cannot attack me. You cannot call me names. You cannot use a hostile, aggressive tone that's designed to hurt or intimidate me. So when your child crosses that line, when they say, you're so stupid, or I hate you, or they swear at you, that's where you draw the boundary. You don't engage. You don't argue. You calmly say, that's disrespectful. I'm not going to have a conversation with you when you talk to me like that. When you're ready to speak to me respectfully, I'll listen. And then you walk away. You don't give them your attention. You don't debate whether what they said was that bad. You just hold the line. And later, when they're calm, you circle back. Earlier, you called me stupid. That's not okay. I understand you were upset, but that's not how we talk to each other in this family. Next time you're frustrated, here's what you can say instead. You're teaching them that they can have big feelings and strong opinions, but they have to express them in a way that doesn't damage relationships. Here's where it gets really nuanced, and this is the part that keeps parents up at night. What about eye rolling? What about sighing dramatically? What about saying fine in that tone? What about storming off to their room? These are the gray areas. And honestly, the answer depends on your family values, your child's developmental stage, and the context. For some families, eye rolling is considered disrespectful and gets addressed every time. For other families, it's seen as a normal part of emotional expression and gets ignored unless it's accompanied by other disrespectful behavior. There's no universal right answer, but here's what I tell parents. You get to decide what's acceptable in your home. Just be consistent about it and be willing to explain why that boundary matters to you. For example, in our family, we don't roll our eyes at each other because it's dismissive and it shuts down communication. If you're frustrated, you can say, I'm really frustrated right now, But eye rolling isn't how we show respect. The key is that your child understands the reasoning behind the boundary, not just the rule itself. And here's the other piece. As your child gets older, some of these boundaries might need to shift. What's unacceptable for a 7-year-old might be developmentally normal for a 14-year-old. You have to be willing to adjust as they grow. Let me talk about teenagers for a minute, because this is where the power struggles often peak. Teenagers are supposed to push back. They're supposed to question your values, challenge your rules, and assert their independence. That's literally their developmental job. They're figuring out who they are separate from you. But that doesn't mean you let them be disrespectful. It means you have to get really comfortable with disagreement. Your teenager is going to tell you they think your curfew is ridiculous. They're going to push back on your rules about screen time, or friends, or how they spend their money. And your job is not to shut that down. It's to engage with it. You say, okay, tell me why you think the curfew is unfair. You listen. You ask clarifying questions. You validate their perspective. I hear that you feel like you're mature enough to stay out later, and I can see why you think that. And then you either adjust the rule if their reasoning makes sense, or you explain why you're holding the boundary. Here's why I'm keeping the curfew where it is right now. In 6 months, we can revisit this conversation. What you're modeling is, I respect you enough to hear your perspective. I'm not a dictator, but I'm also the parent, and some decisions are mine to make. That's the balance teenagers need. They need to feel heard, but they also need to know you're still the adult in charge. All right, that's it for today. Remember, the confusion you're feeling about backtalk and boundaries isn't because you're failing. It's because you're navigating a massive generational shift without a roadmap. You're trying to teach your kids something you were never taught yourself, how to have a voice and be respectful at the same time. The fix? Make it safe to disagree. Model respectful disagreement. Give them the specific words to use. Stay calm when they use those words, and hold the line when they cross into genuine disrespect. Your child can have a voice. You can still be the parent in charge. Both things can be true. If this was helpful, hit subscribe so next week's episode shows up automatically. And if you want more strategies for handling the tough parenting moments, head to my website, www.climbingfishparenting.com, and sign up for my newsletter. You'll get practical scripts, real-life examples, and strategies you can use right away. That strategy I just gave you, it's the whole climbing fish philosophy in action. There's a quote, everybody's a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing it's stupid. Your kid isn't broken. Your parenting isn't broken. Sometimes we're just asking our fish to climb trees. That's what we fix here. I'm Dr. Christy, and I'll see you next week.